The scream cut through the noise of the crowded mall like glass shattering. Everyone turned. Everyone except him. 38-year-old Jack Mercer, janitor and single father, was already moving. His mop hit the floor as he sprinted toward the sound. Near the fountain, a girl no older than 10 sat on the tiles, mute, terrified, while two rough men loomed over her, whispering threats no child should ever hear. Jack didn't think. He stepped between them, steady as steel. "Back off," he said, voice low. The taller man smirked, until Jack's eyes, cold and calm, told him he'd picked the wrong janitor. The next moment changed everything. Before we dive in, drop a comment with where you're watching from, and don't forget to hit subscribe for more videos like this. Let's begin. The man in the leather jacket took a step forward, his grin curling into something ugly. "Relax, old man. The kid's lost. We're just helping her." Jack Mercer stood firm, his work boots planted in the slick tile, the hum of the fountain behind him. His heartbeat thudded in his ears, but his voice didn't waver. "Then why's she shaking like that?" The girl clutched her small notebook tighter, the edges worn, a crayon-drawn sunflower on the cover. She couldn't speak. Jack could see that in her trembling lips and wide, pleading eyes. She scribbled something so fast, her pencil broke, turned the page, and held it up. "They took my mom." The words froze Jack where he stood. For half a second, he saw his own daughter, Emily, same age, same scared eyes, when she'd lost her mom to cancer 3 years ago. "Step away from her," Jack said again, quieter this time, but it hit harder. The shorter man laughed, flashing a tattoo that looked military, no, private security. "You don't want to do this, janitor. You've got no idea who you're messing with." "Neither do you." Jack reached for his radio, clipped to his belt, and pressed the side button. "Security office. This is Mercer. Need assistance by the main fountain. 2 suspicious individuals attempting to abduct a child." Static. No response. The mall's sound system switched tracks, soft pop music playing over the tension. The taller man lunged. Jack sidestepped, years of muscle memory kicking in. His arm swung out, not elegant but efficient. Caught the guy's wrist, twisted hard, and the man stumbled with a grunt. The second came swinging, but Jack ducked, grabbed his mop handle, and drove the wooden end into his stomach. It wasn't a fight. It was survival. The crowd gasped. Phones came up, recording, whispering. The little girl pressed herself against the wall, tears welling in her eyes. "Jack!" a voice yelled. It was Rick, the mall's night security guard, running from the opposite end. "What's going on?" Before Jack could answer, the sound of engines roared outside. Black SUVs, 3 of them, slid up to the curb, tires screeching. Men in black suits spilled out like a movie scene, moving with military precision. Rick froze. What the hell? The 2 attackers, if that's what they were, immediately threw up their hands. "We didn't touch her," the shorter one shouted, pointing at Jack. "He's the one who—" But the men from the SUVs ignored them. Their leader, a tall, clean-cut man with a radio earpiece, strode straight toward the girl. "Miss Ava, we've been looking everywhere for you." The child's tears broke into shaking sobs as she clung to Jack's leg. Jack frowned. "You know her?" The man nodded curtly. "She's the daughter of Elizabeth Grant, the CEO of Grant Tech Industries. She was taken 2 days ago. We've been tracking her signal here." He glanced down at the girl, voice softening. "You're safe now, sweetheart." Jack's pulse slowed, confusion setting in. "Wait, you're telling me this little girl's—" "Yes," the man interrupted. "And you, sir, just prevented a national incident. The two supposed kidnappers were immediately cuffed and shoved toward the SUVs. One of them shouted, "You have no idea who you're messing with. This isn't over," before being silenced by the slam of a car door. Rick exhaled. Man, you just tackled a kidnapping ring in the middle of a food court. Jack knelt beside the girl, who still wouldn't let go of his arm. She scribbled again on her notepad and showed him. "Thank you." He smiled softly. "You don't need to thank me, kid. I just did what anyone should have done." The agent stepped forward, his tone respectful now. "Mr. Mercer, the family will want to meet you personally. Miss Grant owes you everything." Jack chuckled under his breath, wiping sweat from his brow. "Tell her no thanks needed. I've got floors to clean." But before he could walk away, the girl tugged his sleeve again. She pointed at his ID badge, Janitor Supervisor, Mall Services, and then wrote one more shaky line on her page. "You're the first person who didn't look away." Jack froze, throat tightening. That hit deeper than any praise could. He reached out, gently brushed her hair back from her face, and said, "Then promise me something, Ava. Don't ever stop looking for the good in people, even when it's hard to see." The agent nodded to his men. "Let's get her to her mother." As the SUVs pulled away, Rick clapped Jack's shoulder. "You're a hero, man." Jack shook his head. "Nah, heroes wear suits in that world. I just mop floors." But deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. The way one of the kidnappers smirked before the doors shut. It wasn't just a threat. It was a promise. And as he watched the convoy disappear into the dusk, the reflection of those black SUVs shimmered across the polished mall floor he'd just cleaned, like a warning written in silence. By morning, the story had already made headlines. Mall janitor foils kidnapping attempt. Jack Mercer's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Local reporters, co-workers, even the mall manager, who hadn't remembered Jack's name in 5 years, left a voicemail that sounded suspiciously warm. But Jack ignored it all. He dropped his daughter, Emily, at school, packed her lunch with the same peanut butter sandwiches she loved, and went straight to work like nothing happened. He'd seen enough attention in his younger days. Military service, deployments, medals that didn't fix a broken marriage. Fame didn't interest him. Quiet did. He'd just finished scrubbing the marble entrance when 2 men in suits approached. "Mr. Mercer?" one of them asked. "We're with Grant Tech Security. Ms. Elizabeth Grant would like to meet you, personally." Jack frowned, leaning on his mop handle. "I already told your boss I'm no hero." The man's tone softened. "Sir, her daughter hasn't spoken a word in over a year. But last night, she said her first word." Jack blinked. "She can talk?" The guard smiled faintly. "She whispered one thing. Your name." Jack's grip tightened on the mop. The silence between them felt heavier than the floor he'd just cleaned. "All right," he said finally. "I'll come." The Grant Tech headquarters towered above the skyline like a monument of glass and pride. Jack stood in the lobby feeling painfully out of place. His uniform freshly washed but still stained, his boots scuffed, his calloused hands folded awkwardly. The receptionist guided him into an elevator that climbed with quiet speed. "She's waiting in the executive wing," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Top floor." When the doors opened, Jack was met by Elizabeth Grant herself. Mid-30s, sharp suit, sharper presence. She extended her hand, professional but sincere. "Mr. Mercer, I owe you everything." Jack shook it firmly. "Just did what anyone decent would do." Her lips curved faintly. You'd be surprised how rare decency is these days. They stepped into her office. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Modern art that probably cost more than Jack's entire yearly wage. On the far couch sat little Ava, her sketchbook open, coloring quietly with crayons. When she looked up and saw Jack, her entire face lit up. Elizabeth's eyes softened. She hasn't smiled like that in months. Jack crouched beside Ava. "Hey there, partner," he said quietly. "You all right?" She nodded and wrote on a fresh page. "Mom cried all night. She said you're a good man." Jack's throat tightened. He looked up at Elizabeth. "You raised a brave kid." Elizabeth exhaled, a tremor hiding behind her composed tone. "She was taken 2 days ago. My driver was ambushed on the way home from school. We thought we'd lost her." Her voice cracked, and for a second, the CEO mask slipped, revealing a terrified mother beneath. Jack hesitated, then said softly, "You got her back. That's what matters." Elizabeth looked at him then, not as a janitor, but as someone who'd walked through hell and made it back. "Mr. Mercer, I'd like to repay you, any way I can. Money, housing, job, name it." He shook his head. "Ma'am, with respect, I didn't do it for that. I've got my little girl. That's enough for me." "Still," she insisted, "at least let us offer something meaningful." She picked up a folder from her desk and slid it across. "Head of Facility Security. You'd oversee maintenance, protection protocols, and safety measures. Triple your current salary." Jack stared at the offer. "You want a janitor running security for $1 billion company?" Elizabeth smiled faintly. "No, I want the man who didn't look away." He didn't answer right away. Ava reached out and slipped her small hand into his, like she was casting the deciding vote. That night, Jack walked home under the orange glow of streetlights, the contract in his pocket. Emily ran to him from the porch. "Dad, you were on TV again? My teacher said you're a hero." Jack scooped her up, spinning her once. "Heroes are overrated," he said with a grin. "Then what are you?" she asked. He paused, looking at the horizon. "Just a guy trying to keep people safe." But something about Elizabeth's words gnawed at him. "We thought we'd lost her. If a billionaire's child could be snatched that easily, something wasn't right." He replayed the scene, the men, the tattoos, the radio static when he called for help. Someone had jammed the mall's security, someone inside. And whoever those men worked for, they weren't finished. As he carried his daughter inside, headlights flickered down the street. A black SUV slowed near his driveway, then rolled on. Jack's jaw clenched. His instincts, the same ones that had saved lives overseas, were screaming again. He whispered to himself, "All right. Guess we're not done after all." 3 nights later, Jack's instincts proved right. He was locking up the maintenance wing at Grant Tech headquarters when he heard the sound. Faint, mechanical, deliberate. A soft click echoing through the polished hall. Not the hum of cleaners, not the whir of vents. It was the metallic sound of a camera shutting off. Jack froze, glancing up. The security camera above his head was dark, dead. He moved quietly, slipping his keyring back into his pocket. 2 more cameras down the hall were also offline, their red indicators gone. Someone had disabled them manually. He tapped his earpiece, a new one, courtesy of his security promotion, and whispered, "Control, do you copy?" Static. The same dead silence he'd heard at the mall. He didn't wait for backup. Jack moved down the hallway, following the faint sound of voices. It led him to a restricted server room, one he'd cleaned 100 times but never entered during off hours. The door was cracked open, and light spilled across the floor. Inside, two men stood near the main console, dressed in maintenance uniforms identical to his. But Jack knew every janitor in that building. These weren't his people. "Copy the last 6 months of files," one muttered. "CEO Grant thinks she's clean, but her company's been bleeding data to our client for years. After tonight, she'll have nothing left." Jack's voice cut through the room. "You picked the wrong building to rob." The men spun around. One reached for a weapon under his vest, but Jack was faster. He slammed the door shut with his shoulder, yanking the nearest fire extinguisher off the wall. The metal clanged as it connected with the man's arm, sending his tablet skidding across the floor. The other lunged, knife glinting. Jack blocked, twisted, and swept his leg out, sending him crashing into the console. "Who sent you?" Jack demanded, pinning him down. The man spat blood, sneering. "You think this ends with us, janitor? You've got no idea how deep it goes." Before Jack could press further, the alarms blared. Red lights flashed through the room. "Security breach detected. Sector 5. Within seconds, Elizabeth Grant and her head of corporate security burst in, weapons drawn. The two intruders were cuffed on the spot. Elizabeth's eyes met Jack's, equal parts fury and fear. "How did you—" "I didn't," Jack said, straightening his jacket. "They were already here. This wasn't about money. It's data theft, corporate espionage. And if it's the same group that went after your daughter—" She turned pale. "You think this is connected?" "I know it is." He knelt to pick up the fallen tablet. The cracked screen flickered, encrypted files transferring to an unknown server. Jack unplugged the drive, stopping it midstream. One name appeared at the top of the screen before it died. Hargrave Systems. Elizabeth whispered the name like it was poison. "That's our biggest rival. But they'd never risk something this reckless." "They didn't," Jack interrupted. "They hired people who would." She studied him then. Really looked, not at his uniform, but at the scars that lined his hands, the steadiness in his eyes. "You've done this before," she said quietly. "Not by choice," Jack replied. "But once you've seen what people will do for power, you learn not to be surprised." The next morning, Elizabeth called him into her private office again. Ava sat nearby, quietly sketching in her book. When Jack entered, she looked up and handed him a drawing. Him standing between her and the bad men at the mall, mop in hand like a sword. He smiled softly. "You're quite the artist." She pointed to a small word at the bottom of the page. "Hope." Elizabeth's voice trembled slightly as she said, "She hasn't stopped drawing since that night. I think you reminded her that good people still exist." Jack looked out at the skyline. "I'm just trying to make sure no more kids go through what she did." Elizabeth took a deep breath. "Mr. Mercer, there's something else. Those men from last night, they weren't hired by Hargrave." Jack turned. "Then who?" She hesitated. "One of my own board members, someone I've trusted for years." "Why?" She opened a drawer and slid a file toward him. "To take over the company. They used my daughter as leverage to force me into signing over control of our patents. When you stopped them at the mall, you ruined their plan." Jack's jaw tightened. "So now they're trying again, a different way." "Exactly," she said. "And if you're willing, I need your help to stop them." He thought of Emily, asleep at home, of Ava, who'd finally found her voice in a world that wanted to silence her, and of the men who thought a janitor would stay quiet just because he wore a cheap uniform. He met Elizabeth's eyes. "I'll help, but not for money. For the kids, the ones who don't get second chances." Ava smiled then, the first real smile since the night he met her. Jack reached for the file. Let's finish this. Outside, black SUVs once again lined the company driveway. But this time, they weren't a threat. They were there to protect, not to hunt. And as Jack stepped out into the sunlight, his reflection in the glass doors looked different. He wasn't just the janitor anymore. He was the man who refused to look away, again.